Hey everybody, so today we are going to be working on block 6 of our Hoop Sisters Flower Patch Sampler Bouquet Quilts. Okay, so we've got either a 4-patch layout option or an on-point option. You may be doing both, that's entirely up to you. So we're going to be making, again, block 6, which is this one. We've decided that we're using purple, this darker pink, and a green batik, and of course our background color. So let's look at what we need before we get started. So I, of course, always recommend having your instructions on hand. It's just going to be a nice little handy dandy thing to have. This is going to be just your initial layout and just a sample of your finished sizes and your finished block. So depending on which layout you're doing, of course, you're going to want to check and make sure if you're doing the on-point layout, which is to make 1 block, and the 4-patch layout, which is to make 4 blocks. So depending on which one you're doing, or if you're doing both, you will need to decide which size you're doing, 5 or 8, and of course you will need to cut your fabric pieces. Again, this is for the 4-patch layout, so this page is going to be quadruple the amount as on the on-point layout. So let's kind of look at what we need to have on hand. I have my fabrics listed. You're going to need a total of 4. So there's, of course, my background, my fabric 1, which are going to go at the bottom and all the other corners. There's going to be your fabric 2, which is the leaves. There is going to be your fabric 3, which is the main big part of your flower here. And then you're going to need fabric 4, which is the center of our flower here. So for each block, I'm going to need 1 piece of fabric 4, 1 piece of fabric 3, 2 pieces of fabric 2, and then you're going to need several different pieces of fabric 1. You're going to need 1 square, and then 2 of the slightly larger rectangle, and then the largest rectangle you're going to need 1 piece as well per block. And of course you're just going to cut those according to which size you're doing. Another thing you're going to need is decide how you're putting the batting in. So I, of course, am using no-show mesh with a piece of either cotton poly or a piece of 100% cotton batting. There is also an optional wool option. If you were doing the optional wool, or if you're cutting the batting as you go like I am, we're going to go over here to the optional wool, and that is the size that I'm going to cut. Where it says like 7 3/4 by 7 3/4 for the 8-inch size, I just cut those 8 by 8. I do the same thing for the 5-inch piece. I just cut that 5 by 5. It's just easier to cut. If you're doing the battleizer, of course, you're going to cut it large enough to fit your hoop. And then if you are using the optional Vanish Light thread, you're also going to want to have that on hand. And then you're going to want to have your colors picked out. So for all of my flip and folding, I am using Exquisite Thread color number ES165. I'm also using that for my quilting. This is going to be the color I'm going to use in my dark pink, ES190. For my green stems, I'm going to be using 956, and purple that I've been using through the whole thing is 392. These are all, they all begin with ES, and they are all Exquisite Thread colors. Another thing I recommend having on hand is some embroidery tape and a good pair of fabric trimming scissors. Of course, your instructions and your flash drive with the design loaded. So bear with me for just a hot second. We're going to gather all of our supplies. I'm going to move my camera and we're going to get started. I am working on a brand new cabinet today. Forgive me as I kind of arrange stuff because I am not used to this cabinet yet. We just got it. We are working on the Horn 9030, I believe is the name of the cabinet. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong, but it's just a really cute cabinet made for these larger machines, and I quite like it thus far. So I've not recorded on it yet. I've worked on it today, but I've not recorded, so bear with me. So, of course, we're going to load in our hoop size at what block we are doing. So I'm doing the 8-inch block. I've got that loaded, ready to sew. It's going to be about 7,886 stitches. There's going to be 26 color changes, and it's going to take about 15 minutes to stitch out at the speed that I have got this set to. So let me just kind of angle the camera to where we are seeing the hoop, and let's get going. So I'm going to start by sewing machine stitch step 1 directly onto the stabilizer. So if you are working with the battleizer, or if you're doing the no-show mesh like I am, that is going to remain the same no matter what you do. Now, if you're using Battleizer and you're going to do the optional wool, you may want to go ahead and raise your embroidery foot height up a little bit. They do recommend that. Now that we have the outline stitch stitched directly down onto the stabilizer, we're going to go ahead and place our batting on top. If you are doing the optional wool, you will go ahead and sew machine stitch step 2. If you're not doing that and you're using the Battleizer, you're just going to go ahead and completely skip stitch 2. If you're doing like me, what I prefer to do is to actually repeat machine stitch step 1. You can do machine stitch step 2. It just holds it down with a zigzag stitch. That is entirely at your discretion, how you see fit to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat machine stitch step 1. So I'm just going to go back. Bear with me as I finesse that. And that's just going to tack our batting down. And then I completely skip step 2. I think I've shown sometimes me stitching it out just because I want you guys to see what it looks like and how it trims. But no matter what, if you're using the optional wool or if you are using the stabilizer and the batting like I am, you are going to want to go ahead and trim this batting after it stitches out. Again, I've got no show mesh in the hoop. And this is a cotton poly blend batting, but you can use 100% cotton. I thought this was a great time to use our leftovers. I should mention that I have exquisite thread color number ES165. That is what I do all of my flip and folds with. And that is what I have been doing all of my quilting with because I have a beautiful light cream color batik as my primary background. So let's go ahead and trim that close to the stitch. Okay. And then where I went back, I need to go back forward and I need to skip machine stitch step 2. So let me just do that real quick. There we go. So on machine stitch step 3, it is going to stitch the basic outline directly onto the batting. And so that's going to be like your main primary outline of your all of your pieces. So I just go ahead and leave the same color. I will not actually be switching colors at all until we get to the very, very end. Now, for those of you that are using water soluble, so that would be the Vanish Light. If you are using the Battleizer and you want to use the water soluble, you're going to begin machine stitch step 1 with that. And if you're doing the optional wool, you'd also want to do step 2 with that. So, Battleizer, optional wool, Vanish Light thread, that is what they recommend. It is not a necessity, it is a recommendation. Like I said, I'm doing mine entirely different, but the instructions do clearly lay that out for you. So if you are wanting to do the optional water soluble threads, the instructions do that lay that out for you very clearly. But by the time you get to machine stitch step 3, you want to make sure you have in a light colored thread and you have in your regular embroidery bobbin, whatever your machine weight requires. So again, no matter which way you're doing things, when you start doing the fabric placement, everything is exactly the same. So I'm going to start out with one of my small fabric rectangles, my smallest one. I think that's my smallest one. No, that's not my smallest one. This is my smallest one. And you are going to take it and you are going to encompass all the stitching around the top corner. That is where we're going to place fabric number 1. So you want to make sure all the stitching is covered and you want the fabric to supersede beyond the batting at both the side, and I do also have that at the top as well. And then we're going to go ahead and start, and we are going to sew our tack down step, which is machine stitch step 4. And it is going to stitch all the way around. I know it doesn't on every step, but this one it does. And then we're going to trim on the bottom and on the inside about 1/4 of an inch away. We are going to leave all of this excess on the far outside pieces and at the top. So we're going to trim about 1/4 of an inch away. And we're just going to go all the way up. There we go. So just roughly give it a decent trim, about 1/4 of an inch away. And then we're going to go ahead and we are going to grab our fabric number 4, which in this case is our purple. We're going to take our strip. We're going to put it roughly flush with the raw edge that we left roughly 1/4 of an inch with. And I like to take it up to where it exceeds beyond the hoop by about an inch or so. Then we're going to hit start and it's going to tack it down. The reason I like for it to supersede is because when I trim this, I want to be able to trim it all evenly. And the fabric does kind of need to hang beyond just a little bit for your trimming purposes. Perfect. Now after you sewed step 5, which tacked the fabric down, we're going to flip it over and we're going to sew machine stitch step 6, which is going to tack it down after you do your flip and fold. Perfect. Okay. Now, once again, we're going to trim away at the bottom and at the side. We're going to roughly leave 1/4 of an inch. Just roughly. Good deal. And then we are going to go ahead and get ready to place our fabric 4 in the next place, which is just right to the side of it. We're going to take and we're going to let it extend beyond, just like we did before, and we're going to put the back side of it roughly even with the raw edges at the bottom and the back side. We're going to show machine stitch step 7, and we're going to tack that piece of fabric down. Wonderful. Excuse me. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to flip that forward. We're going to finger press it, or if you want to use a roll and press and a fabric folding pin, whatever you're into. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to tack this down after the flip and fold. And it is going to just sew that down on the sides. I'm going to just knock that big hunk of excess off. And they want you to trim 1/4 of an inch away again. I'm going to slide this out real quick just so I can access it a little bit easier. Okay. And I got a little too much right there. Perfect. All right, good deal. All right. Slide that back in. So now we're going to move on to machine stitch step 9, which we're going to take fabric number 3, which is our pink in my particular scenario. And I've had my fabric clips on here just kind of labeling everything for me as I go. So I'm going to take and I'm going to put it here on the bottom side. So I'm going to put that roughly even with the previously sewn raw edges. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's flipped down, covering the previous pieces of fabric. And we're going to tack that down with machine stitch step 9. Okay, after 9 has been stitched, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to flip that over. We're going to smooth that down. And we're going to let it stitch. Okay. Once again, you're going to trim about 1/4 of an inch away. So let's just get right in there. Okay. Okay. Now, you would think that it would go ahead and do the other side of the pink like it did the purple earlier, but it doesn't. You're going to take your middle piece, the piece you cut 2 of your fabric 1, and you're actually going to take and put that down next. So again, just kind of covering all of your edges, getting it roughly even, and it's going to sew machine stitch step 11 to tack that down. We're going to go ahead and flip that over, press it down well, and then you would think that it would tack over on the side like it did previously, but it does not. It only does it here on the bottom area. Great. Okay, so it moved. So I'm going to trim about 1/4 of an inch away. Okay. And then I'm going to grab the rest of my fabric 3 strip. I'm going to put it down over top of the previously sewn fabrics, getting the raw edges roughly even with each other. And I'm going to stitch that down as well. This is going to be machine stitch step 13. Okay, we're going to flip that back over. We're going to smooth that down as best we can. And we are going to let that get tacked down with machine stitch step 14. Great. Okay, now again, we're going to trim about 1/4 of an inch away. Just eye-shotting it the best you can. And just extend all the way up to the edge of the fabric, being sure to cut under both layers when you do the flip and folds. It does get a little thick in the seam if you don't. Okay, I've tried to pull my thread out of my needle. So you are done with fabric 3, you are done with fabric 4 now. You are now going to take, whoops, sorry, I hit my camera. You're now going to take your other rectangle piece, the medium size, the other piece that you had left of fabric number 1, and you are going to lay it even with the raw edges of the previous fabrics, putting the raw edges even just right up here in the top corner, and you are going to tack that down with machine stitch step 15. And see, I'm going to let the fabric where I left it, where it's going to kind of flip over and extend beyond just a little bit. So again, we're going to flip that over. Again, if you like a fabric folding pin or a rolling press, I'd go ahead and use those here as well. And then we're going to do machine stitch step 15, which is going to tack our piece of fabric down. Again, it's not going to do it on the outside edges just like it did over here. So we're only going to trim 1/4 of an inch away from this bottom side. Okay. Now we're going to move on to fabric number 2. You're going to go ahead and want to have both pieces of those ready. You're going to take, and it's going to start with the top one. And again, you're going to put that roughly even with your previous stitch line. And you're going to tack that down with machine stitch step 17. Once you've got that done, go ahead and flip it over just like we've been doing with all the other pieces. And we're going to go ahead and stitch it down as well with machine stitch step 18. And again, it only stitches on the bottom side. It doesn't stitch on the outside. Okay, so we're going to trim about 1/4 of an inch away. I am going to kind of pay a little extra special attention to this little bit of bulk right here. Trying to get the most of it out as I can, because the next piece is going to flip over and it is going to get kind of thick in that spot if I don't. Okay, so I'm talking about right there. So just trim that as best you can. So we're going to take our next piece and we're going to lay it adjacent to the previous piece over the previous line of stitching, just kind of getting those raw edges even with each other. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch the next step, which is machine stitch step 19. And it's going to tack down your second piece of fabric, number 2. And these are both the same size. So no guesswork there. We're going to flip our piece of fabric down and we're going to stitch once again. And this is going to be machine stitch step 20. Good. So again, we're going to trim away about 1/4 of an inch. I'm getting a little impatient with it. There we go. That's better. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and take our last piece of fabric. So you should just have one piece of fabric, number 1, left out of all of the fabrics you've had thus far. And then you're going to lay it just previously on the other edge, the uneven edge. And you want to have those corners extend a little bit beyond both sides of your primary outline. Whether you're using Battleize or optional wool, doing it with stabilizer and batting the way I am, just let it extend. And that was machine stitch step number 21. We're going to flip it over and do step 22. Just smooth it down as best you can. Now here's where 22 is going to come into play. So this is where we're going to start thinking about what we're going to do as far as the backing goes. So if you are doing the optional back, now you want to go ahead, take the hoop off the machine, flip it over to the back side, and put your optional backing on. If you are doing the Vanish Light, you'll want to go ahead and switch your thread over right now in both the bobbin and the top, because this would wash out. And I like to tape on this step because it's going to do an outline stitch around the whole thing. And I do not want my embroidery foot to flip my fabrics wrong or anything to that effect while I'm sewing out the last of the tack down steps. So I'm just going to tape all of this very well real fast. And I'm not even going to bother taking it off. I'm going to leave all that on there. And when I go to trim this down to 1/2 inch all the way around, when the block is finished, that's where it's going to come off. And of course, if you're adding the optional back, you'll want to go ahead and tape it down as well. So we're going to go ahead and stitch out machine stitch step 22. Again, if you have the optional back and you were using the optional back in the Vanish Light, you would want to have changed those before you press start on your machine. I have left, again, the same color and the standard embroidery bobbin. I'm using it through the whole thing until after I finish the quilting. Now, when machine stitch step 22 is done, you guys are going to want to go ahead and you are going to want to switch your bobbin to whatever bobbin that you need it to be. So if you were doing the quilting like I'm doing the quilting, it is going to just be done in the regular embroidery bobbin because I'm adding my back at the end, and then I'm using the thread color that I have it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and start stitching machine step 23 because that is our quilting, so it takes it a minute to get done. So I'm going to go ahead and let that stitch while we talk about this. But if you were doing the optional back, you're going to want to go ahead and change that out right here. So if you're doing the optional back, you want to go ahead and change your bobbin thread to match. So whatever you think you need to do. Okay, So of course this step is going to take about the most time. It's going to take about 4 minutes according to my machine to stitch this step out, and then you're going to want to go ahead and have on hand whatever color you are wanting to stitch your stem out. It's also going to stitch a little bean stitch right through here, and of course you're going to want to change your bobbin according to your top thread, what you want it to use. If you want it to match the back fabric all the way through, you won't change your bobbin. If you want to have your back fabric match your top thread, if you want your top thread and your back thread to match, you will have to have bobbins wound out of it and change them as you go through the next several steps. Oh, came up and out of my needle. I need to fix that real fast. Perfect. Let me go back a few stitches. There we go. Perfect. So it is going to quilt at the bottom, then it's going to quilt at the top, and then it'll do the other two sides. It's doing that same really nice micro feather that we're used to. Again, I'm going to go ahead and get my green ready. I'm using Exquisite color number ES956. Excuse me. So this one and the next step are going to take the most time out of the entire process. Nothing crazy, it's just the way it's going to go. And I always try to mention it, and I believe I have forgotten to. I am using a 9014 embroidery needle. I've used both the Janome needles, which are just Oregon needles, or you can use Schmetz. The reason I like a 9014 versus 7511, which is to know what people use standard for embroidery, is because I feel like the 9014 is a little coarser, where we're going through multiple layers of fabric and we're going through batting and all that good stuff. I feel like a little bit of a sturdier needle does a really good job, especially if you're using that optional back. Another thing to mention is that the instructions are going to talk to you really well about where you need to change your colors and where you need to change your bobbins as you go, especially through this quilting process, because it does get a little confusing. But again, I like to add my whole back piece at the very, very end, and I stitch in the ditch, put it together. That's just my preference. There is more than one way to get from step A to step B. Okay, we're almost done quilting. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch colors real quick. Bear with me for just a second while I do that. Whoops, can't get my fingers through. There we go. And now this is going to be the next color that it's going to stitch out. Again, it's going to do the stem. There's a lot of detailing here. And then it's also going to stitch right through the leaves. Then it's going to switch and do the last two colors. So we're going to let this stitch out. And again, if you're switching your bobbin in the back, you need to do that in between the steps as you change colors. So again, this is Exquisite Thread color number ES956. I'm going to let Lisa finish up the video with you guys. We're getting to the end. But again, it does a lot of nice detailing in the stem and the leaves. And you are almost done. So, woo!
Still stitching out that pretty stem. Isn't that gorgeous? Very detailed. Love it. Hang on, see here what's it doing. Hang on, we'll have some technical difficulties here. Of course, as soon as Emily walks off, it goes crazy. Wouldn't have it any other way. And we're out of bobbin thread. So, that makes sense, right? Now you know if your machine makes that noise, you're out of bobbin thread. And it won't sew without it. I mean, when it's out, it's out. Alrighty, bear with me guys. Let me put us some bobbin thread in here. Very important. I think our needle is still threaded. So, we're going to put our hoop back in on a machine. Well, I'm going to try it. Woo! Oh, that's great. Hang on. Don't despair. There it goes. Let's see here. I am going to be off a little bit here. Hang on. I'm sorry, guys. Move my hoop. I'm going to turn my machine off. I'm going to turn it back on so that I get right on where I left off instead of where my hoop moved a little bit. Because we ain't about to want to do that. Get off and then mess up our beautiful block. Hang tight with me just a second. The machine's powering up. How much are you loving these blocks? They are so pretty. And there's even prettier ones coming. Even prettier ones coming. You think it's not possible, right? It is. Okay, please wait a while so my hoop can thing can move so I can reload it. That must be how long a while is, just a second. Okay, it's going to ask me if I want to go back to my previous memory, and see where we're at here. I like to go back. If I've messed up, I like to go back a little bit and see. Let's see where we're at here. Go back a few stitches from where it messed up, kind of deal. Because you want it to give it room to catch back up. Okay? Okay. Let's see if we got this. And Emily ain't gonna kill us too bad. I think we're gonna be all right. Be all right. We went back enough to catch if we had missed a stitch from our previous oopsie. Technical difficulties. Thanks for being patient with me, guys. I've never done this, so appreciate you. So on the green fabric, part of the, I guess these are the leaves of the flower. Isn't that nice how it went right back to where we were? And nobody has to know we oopsed. That's a great thing about these machines. Alright guys, that completes step 24 with your green thread, which is the ES 956 is what we're using, and it's going to do around this flower, this flower. So we're going to put our pink on, and it's ES 190 is the shade we're going to be using. A second to thread it. I guess I should do like the machine. This is going to take a while. Apparently that's a second. I love Brothers threading the needle thing. as it don't do it. It's awkward. Okay. There it goes. Love it. That's one thing I love about the Brothers is their needle threader. It is so deluxe. Alrighty, this is the pink, and it's number 190. Okay. Here we go with this. Won't take a second. Just 2 more steps, and we're done. Are you still with me? I got up and knocked my thing off of me. Alrighty, that's your pink.
It's probably going to snow.
I'm gonna put my purple on next. Okay, so I want to give me just a second to thread it up, and this is going to be our last step. I get to see this awesome needle threader again, if I can do it right. Heck yeah. Might not mean much to some people if you can't see that needle hole. That is deluxe right there. Alrighty, our purple thread is the ES 392. Last step, guys. Look what a beautiful block. Okay, that completes it. And as per instructions for trimming, the instructions say trim it to 1/4 inch all the way around. We have been trimming ours a 1/2 inch to give us a little more playroom, so we suggest you do that. And as always, we appreciate it. This is block 6, and Emily will be back with block 7 through 12. Have a great day, guys. Happy sewing.